Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you joining us here today at OECD for the webinar Immersive Technologies, Use Cases and Policy Approaches. My name is Sarah Rintoff-Smith. I'm the new head of the AI and Emerging Digital Technologies Division at the OECD. And it's a real pleasure to bring together colleagues from across governments, industry, academia, civil society, as well as international organizations. What we're seeing is as immersive technologies and their applications, whether they be virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, digital twins, or virtual worlds, become more accessible and more sophisticated, they open new possibilities for industry, education, health, cultural expression, public services, and scientific research. And they also prompt real questions about the kinds of governance framework standards and support systems that can help ensure these tools are used in a safe, trusted, and equitable way. So today's discussion really takes place thanks to the kind support of the Ministry of Information and Communication in Japan. It's convened within the broader framework of the OECD Global Forum of Technology, or GFTech as we call it. And GFTech, for those who are not so familiar with it, provides a dedicated space for in-depth multi-stakeholder dialogue to help anticipate long-term opportunities and risks of selected emerging technologies, and to bring together perspectives that might otherwise remain siloed. GFTech's mission is to support values-based cooperation and informed policymaking on emerging technologies, complementing existing international fora and creating room for thoughtful exchange on issues that evolve rapidly and globally. So immersive technologies was one of the first 3 technology focus areas selected by the OECD members for exploration in GFTech. And just to give you a bit of history here, since then, there's been a first GFTech event on the topic in Kyoto, Japan in 2023. And an expert focus group of GFTech also has explored the benefits and risks of the technologies, highlighting policy opportunities and challenges. And the discussions and insights from the GFTech community engagement resulted in the OECD Immersive Technologies Policy Primer, which was published almost 1 year ago. What you can find in the primer is an exploration of how immersive technologies can create value across many sectors, including through innovative and commercial applications and also new approaches to social and public challenges. And the primer also notes that certain risks, such as the collection of highly personal data, potential mental or physical effects, and also the safety of vulnerable populations, such as children in particular, merit our continued attention. And importantly, the primer underscores the value of anticipatory governance and international cooperation to support human-centric, values-aligned development and use of immersive technologies. So in our webinar today, the keynote speaker will be Professor Kosuka from Gakushu University in Tokyo. And he's also a member of our focus group on immersive technologies and will open the discussion with his reflections on the still nascent and fragmented policy landscape surrounding immersive technologies. And we look very much forward to hearing the insights from experiences in Japan, as we consider also aligning a vision for responsible use of immersive technologies internationally. Today, we're also pleased to launch a new OECD paper that offers an overview of national strategies and policies for immersive technologies. And this work maps a diverse range of approaches emerging around the world and provides insight into how countries are supporting innovation, strengthening ecosystems, and exploring use cases and developing early policy frameworks. We'll hear a presentation of that paper covering how governments are experimenting with a variety of tools already, from funding mechanisms and strategic plans to guidelines, collaborative initiatives. And the paper aims to support shared learning, recognizing that different national contexts will naturally lead to different priorities. The goal of today's event is therefore to build on this evidence with real-world perspectives from around the ecosystem. And throughout today's program, we'll hear from policymakers, industry representatives, developers, and practitioners working directly with immersive technologies. And their experiences will help us better understand what is driving adoption, what is enabling innovation, and where challenges or uncertainties remain. These conversations can also illuminate where international dialogue through platforms such as GFTech may help countries and stakeholders benefit from collective insights. And what we see is several broad questions that we think will guide our discussions today. How can we create environments that encourage responsible innovation while supporting safety and trust? What kinds of standards, skills, and infrastructure will be essential for immersive technologies to deliver their full value? And how can SMEs and creators participate meaningfully as these ecosystems grow? We also want to ask ourselves, how can international cooperation help address areas where policy approaches are still taking shape? We appreciate all our speakers joining us to share perspectives and explore these questions together with the audience of this online event. And I really encourage all of you here to use the Q&A function in Zoom to submit any questions you may have. The diversity of experiences engaging with us in GF Techs is our strength, and it's a reminder that the evolution of immersive technologies is not just a technological story, but indeed a very human one. And so with that, I'm pleased to give the floor to Professor Kusuka. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for kindly introducing me, and I hope you can hear me. Well, my name is Soichiro Kozuka. I am a teaching law at Gakushu University in Tokyo. Originally a teaching a corporate and commercial law, but more recently I have been focusing on the emerging technologies and the legal and policy responses to that, and which has kind of led me to come to this world of immersive technology. It is indeed an exciting technology. So I'm very privileged to give this opportunity to talk about this technology and the policy responses to it. Okay, so allow me to share my slides with the audience. Hope it works fine. Oh. Oh. Yes, it's now good. Yes. So, and as was already mentioned, policies on this immersive technologies is still in a very beginning and also very much fragmented around the world. Well, and first of all, and I suppose that many of the audience are indeed quite familiar with this technology, but for those who are not so much. And so immersive technologies is the technology to make people feel, see, or hear, or otherwise perceive virtual happenings as if they were a real one. And this technology can be used in various ways, including healthcare services or education, or in the industry for manufacturing or maintenance services. And also it could be a appropriate tool for the engagement of people in the society. So some people might think that, oh, immersive technology, it's a technology used for, say, gaming or other entertainment services. Yet they are used for that purpose, but not only that. And this technology is very, very useful for the social benefit and a civil engagement. And also the technologies are now being developed very quickly, including the development of the glasses. And so heavy head-mount displays are becoming more and more convenient, and also smart glasses are becoming more and more affordable. However, these technologies also have risks. Not least because of the strengths that these technologies have. These technologies affect people's recognition and perception directly, which is a good thing, but also which means that it could affect people's way of thinking or understanding the world. So if abused, these technologies could distort people's behavior in that manner. Also, it could collect extensively the personal data. So, if these technologies are used to track movements of people, which means that relevant personal data is not only people's names or personal details, but also more kind of corporeal data are also subject to collection. And also, and it could be, it could involve not only the users of these technologies, but also bystanders. So, there are risks and benefits. So, this means that there are needs for policy and responses by the governments and international organizations to make this technology used and appropriately. Oh, yes. So I understand that, and following my speech, and there will be an introduction of the new OECD's publication on the overview of national strategies on the immersive technologies. And I have had the opportunity of going through this overview, and it is impressive that many states have already introduced the strategies, and most of them and after 2020. So these are very recent developments. However, most of these strategies are rather, say, funding or, say, facilitating ecosystems or other kind of industry policy, I would say. And only two states, Japan and Korea, have produced the principles to kind of guide the development and use of these technologies. So, a Korean Communications Commission published a basic principles to protect metaverse users in 2023. And Japanese and Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications published the principles of the metaverse and developed them into version 2.0, and this second version published last October. I had the opportunity to chair a group of experts to develop these technologies. So these are the only two among those jurisdictions that have been surveyed by OECD that have worked on these principles. It was kind of surprise, or rather a shock to me, and because I clearly remember that back in 2023, when the Internet Governance Forum was held in Kyoto. And the OECD and the Japanese government, government Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, co-sponsored a session on the metaverse, on the rules on metaverse, and there we presented the concept of value-based metaverse. So metaverse should be based on the liberal and democratic values. And the session was well attended by the industry representatives, citizen representatives, consumer representatives, and academia. And there seemed to be a consensus that, yes, and a value-based metaverse, this concept is very good. And it was so welcomed by the attendees. So, and it's really a surprise that only a handful of states have developed them into actual principles to guide the development of these technologies. So, I think that there is a need for a global coordination among states to develop the policies concerning these technologies, which have a very big benefits, but also serious risks to the human society. And this coordination should also be useful to us. How we should proceed with this global coordination? That is a question to be asked and considered in depth. And one possibility is that policymakers from various jurisdictions could coordinate with each other and produce a global guidance. Or from the industry, service providers or platform providers could collaborate and find and develop good practices and that are acceptable in the global world. The good point of these industry developments is that they could lead to interoperability of the communities developed by these technologies. or more broadly, stakeholders could communicate with each other and discuss measures to mitigate how we can mitigate risks and enhance the people's literacy. And these are not exclusive to each other, so we could follow one or other or all of these alternatives. And another point that I would like to emphasize is that it is a right time for us to take action now. And why? Not least because of the development of other technologies, including the generative artificial intelligence, which may easily lead to the situation where people cannot distinguish a happenings controlled by people and happenings kind of autonomously generated by the artificial intelligence. If these are this kind of blurring of the world of a people controlled and autonomous happenings and take place in the virtual world, which is perceived by the people to be real and affect directly to people's a recognition and understanding of the world, then that is a real serious issue, which could make people lose trust in these technologies. So we need kind of good governance for these technologies. And many people say, or I hope many people say, oh, good governance for the immersive technology. That's a good development. Yes, but I would also add that talking about good governance is only the beginning. And the real problem is how we can implement this good governance. And so it not least because of the features of these technologies. And it will not be easy to or not appropriate to introduce regulation on these technologies. So rather, that is the reason why I chose the word, carefully chose the word governance. And this a good governance need to be implemented with the collaboration of the industry through the service providers and platform providers. So and that is the reason why I really expect that this occasion of international and communication and having dialogues on the occasions like this and to take place and to attract people from various and groups and have common and coordinated understanding of how we should proceed with this technology together. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope this event will be a fruitful one.
Thank you so much, Professor Kusuka, for this excellent keynote address. Good afternoon, everyone. Before we move on to our first panel session, I'm pleased to introduce Edward Logan. He's the lead author of our latest paper, an overview of national strategies and policies for immersive technologies. If you'd like to read it, we have pasted the link in our chat. Just a reminder, the chat is disabled, but you can submit questions in the Q&A function. Edward, over to you to present the paper's findings.
Great. Thanks so much, Pauline. And thank you, Professor Kozuka. It's always a privilege to have your perspective. Before I get to today's main topic, which is the newly launched paper on national strategies and policies for immersive tech, I want to go back and revisit the paper mentioned by Sarah Rendorf-Smith at the top of the program. Launched about a year ago, was the Immersive Tech Policy Primer, which really serves as a foundation for today's paper. As Sarah mentioned, it goes through various benefits and risks of immersive technologies. It considers different policy areas that may be affected by these technologies. And it essentially aims to support these technologies' human-centric, values-based development into the future. So just briefly, I wanted to point to the infographic on the right, which comes from the report, which is essentially the extended reality continuum. One thing we mentioned in the report is that language around immersive technologies to date has no consensus, and so we use some working definitions, essentially moving from the physical reality on the left. As you add different layers of digital content, you get augmented reality, AR, mixed reality, MR, and then finally virtual reality, where you're fully replacing physical spaces with digital ones. We also use the term spatial computing for going from 2D computing into computing in 3D spaces, and virtual worlds, which are these persistent immersive spaces where you kind of meld physical and virtual realities together. So on the next slide, we show the Venn diagram, many of the different areas that are discussed in the report. So immersive technologies have a lot of potential benefits that they'll bring to society, also different areas of risk. And in the middle, you'll see there's a handful of issue areas where potentially there could be a shift more to the benefit side or to the risk side. And this is in part where you might have policy play a role. So by mitigating risk or by enhancing benefits, we will hear about a number of these different applications and potential benefit areas later today, especially during the panel. So I look forward to those. So I'll now jump into today's paper. So I'm excited to be launching this finally. It's just gone online in the last few days. Essentially, the paper works with a policy sample of 53 policy instruments from around the world. These were collected both through desk research and through multiple OECD surveys that have been done in recent years. So while it's not entirely a complete sample of all policymaking that's been done, it's fairly comprehensive. And it's enough to give you a good analysis of the different trends and also to convey kind of this fragmented policy landscape that's emerged thus far. So to give a clearer sense of the trends, these policies have been organized into what we call these 5 different groupings. The first of these is what we call targeted funding, which is essentially policies that provide direct support to immersive tech, either for their development or for their deployment. This is the kind of non-fungible funding typically. The second is non-targeted funding. Often this is where you will have multiple digital technologies that are named, something like a pool of funding, and there's fungible support for immersive technologies, which are named explicitly in the policy. The third is digital technology ecosystem support. And this is more where you have support for the structures around immersive technologies. So for example, it could be for connectivity infrastructure or for standards. The fourth is national and subnational strategies. So this is where government lays out its intentions, what policy aims essentially has that are related to immersive technologies. These may or may not involve direct funding. They may require subsequent follow-ups for specific funding streams. And then finally, as Professor Kozuga spoke about a bit, our guidance or policy principles. And often what we see with these is a connection between immersive technologies and specific values. So for example, trustworthiness, safety, or security, and these are voluntary in nature. So in the next few slides, I'll talk a bit about these trends in terms of how they've been going over time, and then we can go into a few examples. So first, just mapping here on the right, we have all the policies in the sample that have been released since 2010. These have been colored by the groupings, so you can see how both the volume of policy making and the type of policy making has been changing over time. So just a few trends that we'll notice here is that policy making really surged from 2020 onwards. There are multiple academic sources that have tied this to the COVID-19 pandemic. So you can imagine things like interest in remote work, remote healthcare, these sorts of applications through the interest of government. You'll also see that policymaking has shifted in a more targeted direction. So before that, you had a lot of kind of broader digital tech policies that would have included immersive tech in their scope. And then you started getting more kind of narrowly targeted policies. And then finally, since 2022, you've also had the emergence of policy principles, or what sometimes is called soft law or guidance. So now I'll give you a few concrete examples of some of these groupings. So on the next slide, we have targeted funding. So this was one of the most commonly seen policies in the sample. The first of these comes from Belgium. So there was a regional ministry in Flanders that was doing some forward thinking about skills gaps that might emerge in the future. And a plan that they released in 2021 with implementation 22 was basically empowering these regional technical centers, equipping them with the most modern XR hardware, and developing a lending program so that vocational secondary schools all around Flanders could access these. So hundreds of schools were part of the program. There were multiple kind of complementary aspects to the policy. There was an XR Learning Academy, teacher trainings, maintenance support for the equipment. You also saw co-financing so that XR software could be developed that specifically had an education application to it. So there are multiple pillars to this project. And the second that I'd like to mention is the France 2030 program. There's many aspects to it, but within it, there were two specific initiatives that were specifically targeting immersive technologies. So one of the two, it provided grant funding. This would go to innovative productions that included XR usage. So this is kind of cultural experiences. And then the second one is specifically funding for tech companies doing R&D. They would intend to be for anywhere within the virtual world's value chain. And this is to boost these French companies' competitiveness within the European landscape. So on the next slide, we will take a look at a number of the most common policy instruments. So actually, we had 19 national or subnational strategies in the sample out of 53. Notably, all of these emerged from 2020 or onward. As Professor Kozuka had mentioned, the first of these, which I expect we will hear a bit more about in the panel upcoming, is the European Union strategy on Web 4.0 in virtual worlds. It's got multiple pillars to it. In part, it's got an industrial plan. It includes some flagship initiatives. For example, there's a Cityverse, which is about virtual worlds with urban spaces. There's a European digital human twin. And there's an aspect which is about working with global internet governance stakeholders to discuss standards for virtual worlds. And the second of these comes from the UAE. So the UAE had released a national AI plan. And alongside that, the government of Dubai released a Dubai metaverse strategy. So naturally, it builds off of the AI plan and really focuses on related and converging technologies. So a lot of the focus is on areas which are virtual world plus AI plus 5G plus blockchain plus IoT. And some of the concrete measures that are pushed within the strategy include things like measures for attracting foreign companies to invest in Dubai, building out more 5G infrastructure, improving education related to virtual worlds. So again, it's kind of a multi-pronged strategy. And finally, the last slide here on examples. As Professor Kozuka introduced earlier, there's only a handful of countries thus far that have pursued guidance or policy principles. Notably, it's been two countries. It's been just Korea and Japan. And the focus has been on virtual worlds. And these have emerged since 2022. The first of these that I'll mention is Korea's ethical principles for the metaverse. So essentially, this is structured, according to the infographic it right, it's essentially a core of three different values. So these are sincere identity, safe experience, and sustained prosperity. And then in an outer ring around them are 8, what they would call practical principles. So these are things like personal information protection or authenticity. And then alongside these, you have implementation guidelines. So not just for policymakers, but also for platform operators, for users to be able to consider and take into account. And again, these are all voluntary. And the second of these is the principles for the metaverse, now in their version 2.0, which come from Japan's Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. These have been updated now, and they're shown in the infographic to the left. Essentially, it's in three tiers. The first is about improving trustworthiness, and that serves as a foundation for an intermediate tier, which is about self-motivated and autonomous development. And then finally, at the top of the structure, we have democratic values for realizing a safe and secure metaverse. So again, these are a set of guidance that different kinds of stakeholders in the ecosystem can refer to. And so finally, I wanted to note some of the, on the final slide, a few of the reflections that we end the report with. So first of these is that the policymaking thus far has been overwhelmingly focused on enhancing the benefits of immersive technologies. We would also urge policymakers to consider over time the potential to develop different risk mitigation-oriented policies as well. The second is as the adoption of immersive technologies grows into the future, we would suggest that policymakers consider different evidence-based approaches to ensure that they continue to have secure and reliable use, especially given the many kind of distinctive or unique aspects of these technologies. The third of these is for policymakers to also assess and do some further research on the extent to which technology neutral policies are not leaving any potential gaps. So in areas such as privacy or digital security or child safety in the context of immersive technologies. And then finally, we would suggest that policymakers continue to engage in international dialogue around immersive technology policy. In particular, many of these technologies, such as virtual worlds, are inherently cross-border. And so international dialogue is important for reducing policy fragmentation. And with that, I'll thank you for your attention. Pauline has linked to the report. It's also able to be found on the OECD website. And I'll hand off the mic to Elizabeth for our panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward, for all the hard work on the report, as well as for coming in and presenting it for us today. We really appreciate that. So for those who don't already know me, my name is Elizabeth Thomas-Reynaud. I'm the head of the Emerging Digital Technologies Unit here at the OECD. I have the privilege of being the moderator of this next panel. We're going to follow up the keynote and the presentation that you've heard with a bit of a discussion around the diversity of policy choices and applications and their implications also on industry. To have that discussion, I'm pleased to be joined by Alexandre Ibanez. He's the president of the National XR Council in France and co-founder of Immersive XR. We have, as you've already encountered, Suichiro Kozuka, who is the chair of Japan's Ministry of Information and Communication Metaverse Task Force, as well as a professor of law at Gakushu University in Tokyo. We have Rihanna Schwininger-Ladek, who is head of the Interactive Technologies Unit in the Digital for Culture and Education area of the European Commission. Thank you for joining us. And also we have Nathan White, Reality Labs Policy Director for AI Wearables from Meta. So thank you all for participating today in this discussion. I have probably a lot more questions for you myself, and I'm seeing some come in from the audience than we might have time for, but let's dig right in and see how far we get. I think, Alexandre, I'm going to start with you and ask if you could give the audience a bit of a picture of what the main experiences are of French XR companies, startups, SMEs, and the mid-sized innovators, and how they're working to make immersive technologies viable, scalable, and marketable in the context of today's policy and funding environment. I think we're also interested specifically in understanding what are those challenges being faced by XR firms in terms of access to capital, technical infrastructure, interoperability requirements, and route to market. If you could just sort of set the scene from that perspective for us, it would be great.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Hello, everyone. So to make a quick response about the French XR companies. In France, now we have very innovative XR ecosystem with many startups, SMEs, and mid-sized companies. The market is pretty fragmented, and the problem is not from the innovation or from other stuff. It's all about the real bottleneck now is moving from prototype to industrialized product. The main challenges are the access to scale capital and dependence on non-European hardware and software platform to be able to make real interoperability and to be able to have the great access on the IT and fully adopted standards, especially for big companies and big industrial companies and also public institution. So now we have an excellent technologies, but industrialization is still slower than in ecosystem where domestic market absorb innovation faster. So, like I said, the first market here in France is about B2B. The B2C is not pretty industrialized now in France, but a lot of big company use virtual and augmented and mixed reality on training, on education. To give you two big example and use cases. In France, the national sector of education are deploying for 300,000 students now and are working on deploying on 8 million students in France. So it's a very big project from France 2030. The second big use cases is the SNCF, National Company of Rail, which use more than 1,000 headsets to train and maintain all the salaries. So this is a short response.
Thank you very much. Rayan, I saw you reacting a little bit to that, so I'd love to jump to you now and look at how you've been working on this for a while. We heard from Edward that you got out there quite early. Can you tell us a little bit about where you are in your journey on supporting these innovation objectives that you set, at the same time balancing that rights-based policy and regulatory framework, and perhaps what kind of assessments you've been making as you've been going along that journey, just to enlighten us on where we've gotten to.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth and Alexandre and Edward. So indeed, I was noting at what Alexandre was saying, because indeed a lot of what is said, resonates with us and the way we've been investing in the sector. So as you know, maybe not know, I mean, the Commission, the European Commission, has been investing in the development and the uptake of XR technologies and other virtual worlds related technologies for 8 years now. We started doing that when I joined my unit, And we've made important targeted investments directly in the ecosystem through Horizon Europe funds, and more recently through the Digital Europe program, which is more about development. And so the investment part has been one of the important part, but the other part, which has been really quite significant, is about the structuring of the ecosystems. And that's what Alexandre was saying. And what we really saw was that we have a lot of good players along the whole value chain, but the ecosystem at European level was pretty fragmented. So we put up a lot of effort 4 years ago to start really bringing together and creating a European XR and now virtual worlds ecosystem that really brought together SMEs, startups, creators, big players, academia, researchers. And we created an alliance called the AR/VR Coalition, which was a kind of loose alliance, but really gave a platform for the ecosystem to be able to have a dialogue platform with us. And we took this structured approach further recently by creating what we call a European partnership for virtual worlds. So the partnership is an official instrument funded under the Horizon Europe program, where the Commission signs a memorandum of understanding with an association representing the community. And together, in a co-creation mode, we really build what we call a strategic research innovation agenda. And that strategic research innovation agenda is the roadmap that is going to guide the way the Commission is going to invest and support the ecosystem. So that is a very important part of our approach that we've been, able to build. And I'm really proud of it because it means that we have now European ecosystem. It does not mean that it is not fragmented at all. It's completely joined up, but we have one. Today, if we need to really speak with players, we know we have a platform, they can speak to each other. So that's been an important part. So you mentioned also how do we reconcile the innovation objectives with the right-based policy approach, the principle-based approach. So Edward mentioned the strategy that we adopted, that we published in 23, already 3 years ago. So the objective of that strategy was double. It's on the one hand, it was to give a very strong policy support to innovation through immersive technologies and their use in citizen-oriented, industrial, societal, public services. And on the other hand, we wanted to make sure that all this development happens in a way that we can ensure open, secure, trustworthy, fair, inclusive virtual environments. So that is really for us fundamental, that whatever development we are going to be supporting will be based on EU values and principles and fundamental rights, where users, people can feel safe, confident, and really empowered to be able to engage that. And the policy choice that we made was that we will not regulate, but we will make sure that the digital policies that are there, they apply to immersive environments. And we've said it very clearly in the strategy. And we also quote some of the fundamental regulations such as the GDPR, the AI Act, the Data Act, and so on, to say that these are really cornerstones of digital policy. And of course, what we are doing right now is to understand also the intersections between all these different policies and how they affect. And our assessment is ongoing, given as we identifying use cases, and also as we are partnering with the industry to understand what's going on. What we have also launched is our regulatory sandboxes. We're looking into that also to be able to identify gaps, because what we see is, because we don't have a widespread adoption, sometimes we don't necessarily have those gaps well identified and well understood. So that's also a way for us to really see how the different digital policies affect immersive environments and where those potential gaps could be. So voila. So this is in a nutshell, in response to your first question, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. While we're still in the vein of sort of scene setting and figuring out where we are in this juncture in time, I'm perhaps going to turn to you now, Nathan. I'd like to understand better how Meta's assessment of immersive technology's potential has evolved in recent years. We've talked about the policy incline since 2020. We've seen the longer trajectory of the European approach. We've heard about the Japanese principles, and they've even been revised. So I'd like to better understand sort of what are your assessments at Meta, and perhaps maybe some frictions. What are the frictions and issues that are pushing or against or for adoption in areas? Are they technical, they market, regulatory? What kind of user adoption related assessments have you made that are contributing to shifts both in the products you're thinking of and the use cases that you see as most promising for the technology?
Big question. First of all, thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you to Mr. Logan and Professor Kazuka. The presentations were very interesting, and I found myself taking notes and nodding along to a lot of different things. So it is a pleasure to be here and part of this conversation. For context, I should share a little bit about my background. I'm a policy advisor with Reality Labs. I've been with Reality Labs at Meta for 7 years now. And my focus has been on the research labs for developing technology and then commercialization. And so my perspective is a little bit different in that the challenges I see are often how do we push the window and then how do we get things to commercial scale? Where we can often build something very, very custom and very, very expensive, but that's not useful at a scaled market approach. So some of my perspective is around consumers. The question's a big one, and it wraps up a lot of different things. And I want to say approach I take is people decide things. People determine value. People make trade-offs about what is important to them. And we've seen that happen over and over. The development of cameras, Kodak invented the mobile camera in 1888. There was privacy panic. People didn't know how that was going to change society. Louis Brandeis wrote Right to Privacy. Sorry, my perspective is US, so my history is American as well. Wrote Right to Privacy, and then 30 years later became a Supreme Court justice and argued the right to privacy, and it became foundational to American law. During that 30 years, there was a lot of conflict and discussion and suggestions over what is the right way to live in a world where anybody might have a camera. For a period, it was illegal to take cameras into public spaces. For a while, it became taboo to take photos of people in those public places, and those evolved as people got used to the technology and became understanding the value of the technology. There was a social trade-off. Laws were proposed, and there were lots of discussions, but really it was society that figured out the right way for these things to work. And so a lot of our approach is to our first principle is never surprise people, is share what we're doing, bring people along, and let them decide. We should be opinionated and give people controls and have ideas for the right way to approach things, but we should also be humble and say that we're going to figure that out. So I really like a lot of what I was hearing about approaches and dialogues and suggestions and best principles and best practices without regulation. And I think that is conducive to finding that value and finding the right ways that society will accept any potential trade-offs to that value. What I think that we have seen recently, which is kind of making everything more fun and sometimes a little scary, is the speed at which things are combining. That if you think metaverse, you think immersive technology, a lot of it is really AI, machine learning for object recognition, for mapping, simultaneous location and mapping. We've been relying on AI for a very long time. But we think about immersive technologies in a different way than we think about, chatbots and the LLMs that have taken today. But there's a bit of a merging where all of these technologies are interplaying with each other, whether it's using AI to generate worlds automatically or using AI to have different form factors. A lot of it is AI understands the world better, and it's a tool that we can use. Whether it's AI understands the physical world around us and can understand physics and logic and digital twins, or it's understanding relationships and people and what we are doing in the world for more augmented reality to be able to prompt things. So I think the challenge and the opportunity of the recent years is all of these technologies are moving so fast and combining so quickly, there's almost too much opportunity. And when we think that society needs time to sort of adjust and think and decide what is it the right way, what are people comfortable with? If things are moving so fast, it's hard to do if you don't understand. If I say, do you want to be gobbledygook or boogity-book? I don't know. I don't know what either of those things mean. Most consumers don't know what these things are. And so giving them the illusion of choice is still difficult because they need to understand the implications of that. So I think what we can do is a lot of forums like this for discussion and for educating people. And there is a role for governments and civil society to help people understand what are these new technologies? How do you think about them? How are their value? What are the things that matter to you? So I'm very grateful to be on this panel and share this discussion with you because I think these evolutions are really, really, really important. And the most important thing we can do to advance them is to increase the speed of the cycles of the conversations, the best principles, the iteration, and see what consumers and people ultimately do with the value.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that perspective and focus on the question, which was granted a very large and vast question. Professor Kozuka, I was listening to that and thinking you've got some experience watching the principles go into market, have some time and action, see how industry and other users are responding to it. Can you share with us a little bit about that experience, what you've learned, how some of those principles actually impacted behavior and what return you got on that experience?
Yes, sure, with pleasure. Well, first of all, I'd like to emphasize that it is very, very important to have a dialogue among the various stakeholders, because as was just mentioned by Mr. White, it is not easy for lay people to understand what these technologies are. So, it is very important to have kind of common understanding about what these technologies are and what they do and what they could adversely affect the people's behavior or people's thinking. And so that is the first point. And the second point is that, so for the industry also, it is important to secure people's trust in these technologies. So there is a possibility of a new world or new market opened with these technologies, but that is only on condition that people trust in these technologies and people are willing to use these technologies. Otherwise, this a possibility is only an illusion and it will go off. So, and it is very important to have people a trust in this technology. So that is the reason why, and we kind of took this approach of having the industry, having the experts get together and listen to the industry people, the users representatives, consumer representatives, and then develop these guidance so that the development of these technologies and services go in the right way to secure people's trust and enhance or make sure that people's the security and safety are guaranteed when people use these technologies. And the third point is that on almost all the issues, we cannot have the right answer. It is always we need to kind of have balancing among various factors to be considered. So, and there is no a single right way. That is not the goal of these efforts. The important point is that people get together and think about these issues and try to find out a seemingly appropriate way forward. So, and offering this kind of technology, offering this kind of opportunity for the development of these technologies is an important role for the government or for the supranational organizations, like say OECD or European Union or any other organizations.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're definitely seeing some interest in the Q&A about this. I think what we're really discussing in general, which is, how policymakers can balance the immersive technologies role in enhancing things like public services, whether it's healthcare, education, civic engagement, at the same time with such safeguards as manipulation, misinformation, and exclusion of vulnerable groups. And I hear the importance of the dialogue and the importance of participation of different actors, and the fact that there isn't one answer. There are, lots of learnings going on about what existing policies exist. So we're not just slapping on more or contradictory regulations. As we're talking about stakeholders, I want to go back to you, Alexandre, because you're working with the ecosystem and the smaller players, and having worked with them in the past myself, I know that most of the time they're not participating in policy discussions because they are just busy getting on with business. And even Nathan is mostly trying to get on with the business and relating that to policy. But so this is a reality for the industry. Can you tell us a little bit about your sense from working with that community? What's working? What are the policies that are actually making a difference? And what's your assessment of what the gaps are? What is your community sharing with you about that?
Thank you. What I think and what really helps the ecosystem is programs that found industrial technology bricks and real deployment. Like I said, we had a lot of money for prototyping or doing some little stuff. So what we need now is to go at scale, and to be able to do that, we need some program to be able to go at scale. Like it was said before, in France with France 2030, we had two call for projects and a funding of 200,000 million euro on targeted for immersive technologies. The first one is for technological bricks, and the second one is for cultural immersive technologies. So that's the first step, is to focus on real deployment and to go at scale with these technologies. To be able to do that, just to go back to Nathan and Rihanna, now in Europe, we are not on all the value chain. It's important to say that. We are not on the construction of the hardware. We have Meta at the table, but we have Pico from China, or HTC from Taiwan, but we have no big players in Europe there. The second point is we are not on the operating system layer too, so we not manage this part also. We have some difficulty to be able to integrate it properly devices into IT of big institution and big industrial players. Because of that, because all the constructors are using this place to be able to lock in the players, the industrial players, the institutional, and like it was said by Professor Kozuka, immersive technology take a lot of data, and we are able to know everything about you when you are using hardware. So I think we have to focus on policies for real deployment and to be able to close this gap. We have to work on policies with constructors to be able to do that properly and to be also on these layers like hardware construction and operating system and mobile device management. All these layers have to be also targeted.
Great, thank you. I think I'm going to go back to you, Nathan, just for a moment on the point about working together with the ecosystem. You've got a global organization. Interoperability is even more important with a technology like Immersive that's not going to stop at somebody's geographic border. How is that going to get addressed? How are these policies going to support a global marketplace and interoperability, building in the smaller players into the into the ecosystem effectively, avoiding fragmentation, geographical and regional fragmentation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Professor Kazuka gave us a bit of a roadmap of trust, dialogue, support. Trust comes first. The devices, the systems have to work the way that we say they do, and they have to provide value. And then you also have to have dialogue to build trust to understand what it is. I'm thinking of the example of the Human Genome Project. If people remember, we mapped the human genome, and that was a really terrifying thing to a lot of people of, you're going to literally know everything about us, and how is that data going to be used? And is it going to, you're going to predict my future? There were a lot of fears about that. And through dialogue and understanding those fears and understanding the actual real benefits of the technology and the limits of technology, people got more comfortable and became more experienced with it. And there was regulation, at least here in the United States, that prevents insurance companies from being able to use genetic information to deny you coverage. And then we were able to map the human genome and unlock that incredible value for society as a whole. But it required that trust, that dialogue, and that emergence to occur. I feel like we're in a similar situation, whereas as a species, we're really good at saying, that's something new I don't understand. It might be scary. But we need to walk through it, understand it, find out where the real threats are, and adapt to figure out how to adjust to them. And that comes through the dialogue. It also is going to adapt for different priorities and different countries and different regional perspectives on what is valuable. There are differences in laws today on how cameras work in the APAC region versus Europe. We have accepted that, and we understand those cultural values. The final point I want to add, you mentioned interoperability, is society is evolving, people are evolving, and as excited we are about technological revolutions that change everything, people don't do that. People don't suddenly say, there's a new type of computer, so throw away your laptop and get the new one. They evolve into the ecosystem. It's a new tool that is really useful for me in certain ways, so I add it to my life. It doesn't replace everything over immediately. So it's really important to have interoperability so that we can build into the ecosystems that people already have and not ask them to replace their entire lives for a new technology, but to augment with that new tool into their life to bring that value. Being global, iterative, and understanding where people are and meeting them where they are and showing opportunities for new value and then following consumer demand for what they want to do and where that is providing real value in their life, that's what I see is driving long-term success.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. I'm going to turn to you, Rihanna. First, I might have to give Nathan an appointment with my Walkman's conversation with I think it's called the what was it called? The my goodness. Was it the iPod was the first one? Yeah, there you go. The Apple replacement to the Walkman. It did send it into a drawer that I haven't seen it for quite a while. That was a big shift. But I take your point that doesn't happen necessarily overnight for every technology. Rihanna, on interoperability, what's your focus on that on that question. How are you seeing the interplay between the role of the frameworks that you're working on and the role of the sort of standard setting industry stakeholder activities? Can you share a little bit with us on that?
On your comment about the iPod, I think I still have my very first iPod, but unfortunately, I don't know where's my very first Walkman. I must, and I used it a lot as a teenager. It was really, really, something I was very proud of. Yeah, so the standards. So standards, well, we know standards are critical to enable our industries to really, work together and to have to be able to consider the different markets. So in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, the European Commission presented a new standardization strategy that outlines our general approach within the single market and globally. And the strategy proposes a number of actions to really ensure European leadership in global standards. And really as having standards supporting our investments in green and digital transition. So that's something which is really important, while also embedding the values part in technology application, so that the values not remain just values, but they are actually actioned upon. They are part of how the developments are going to happen. Now, for immersive technologies, we included in 24 the topic of virtual worlds in the annual Union Work Plan. And we have an ongoing project with ETSI, which is finishing soon. And the project is called Viviso, and it has already done quite a in-depth, extensive landscaping in relation to the different technologies and ways forward. So some of the key findings are already publicly available, and once the whole thing is done, we will organize workshops and webinars to present them. So that is an important piece which is going to inform our work. We also have the partnership that I mentioned earlier. So the partnership has 3 big building blocks. So one block is about research and innovation technologies, research and innovation in technologies. That's one big part. The second part is going to be about standards. And the third part is about ethical and regulatory. So this whole standards part is really going to be an important piece for the community, the ecosystem, to start working on and to see how we can really advance that in relation to how we are going to move forward. And in addition to this technological standard making, we also have the whole governance part. So some of you were there in 25, so really a year ago. We organized together with the Polish presidency the first global multi-stakeholder high-level conference in Brussels, where we brought high-level policymakers, technology experts, academics, community leaders to really discuss governance models, and what could be a coherent shared governance model. And they even focused on policy solutions for ethical, value-driven shift towards Web 4.0 and standardization issue. So we have a number of strands that are ongoing in relation to technology standards, but also in relation to governance. But all this, of course, needs also a lot of dialogue, a lot of discussion at international level. So as we said, what we said about having a lot of dialogues regarding trust also applies to standards. And we'll be happy really to come and present in one of your forthcoming webinars also the outcomes of things that we have put in place, where really we're trying to look into it more in depth.
Thank you so much for elaborating on those different pieces. It's great both to keep us informed and also this community. We have a really great diverse population participating on this call. I noted that we have policymakers from Latin America, North America, all the way over to Asia, through Europe and around the globe. So as well as other stakeholders from industry, academia, international organizations. So it's great that we're able to share this information. Professor Kozuka, we're going to let you bookend this discussion. So do you have anything else you want this community that's listening to think about when, as we talk about your, Nathan called it your roadmap for moving forward collaboratively, respecting distinct regions and regulatory frameworks, but in a way that is reflecting shared values and the desire to benefit from the technology while ensuring sort of due diligence and risk mitigation?
Well, and before directly responding to a question, and I mentioned that and the multi-stakeholder and a forum that Madam Chevening-Aladek mentioned last year, which took place in Brussels, and I had the opportunity to be there, and it was a really good occasion, and the documents prepared for and after that event is also very fruitful. And I would emphasize that it is a quite a kind of enlightening to us. And on that occasion, and so I mentioned and that yes, and so the real challenge is how to implement the governance model that we discussed, and in order to do so, we need a collaboration and contribution from the industry or service providers. And with regard to immersive technology, so I'm now coming back to your question, Elizabeth. And it is all the more important to have to have the industry to play a big role, because as I mentioned in my earlier intervention, so there is no kind of right answer to address the problem, address the issues. So that means that we need to rely on the transparency of the industry in offering their policies when offering their services, and then let the people choose among these policies. So one service may be operated according to one policy, another service may be according to another policy. Then there is a possibility for the consumers to choose, and that I think that is a good governance. And if the level of transparency is low and people do not really understand what they are choosing, that is not good, and because that will in the end damage the trust and reputation of the whole market, which is something that nobody wants. So, and in order to ensure people's trust, or to have a sound dialogue, and the responsibility of the industry to comply with the transparency when providing services, I think that is a key to a better future.
Thank you very much, all of you. If I understand correctly, really some of the key draw out from this is obviously the discussion is really important. The exchange and understanding is extremely important. I think we have some deeper dives to go in understanding. So how do you ensure that there is that consumer choice? I'm sure, competition, enabling environments, interoperability, all of those elements are, have different nuances in different domains and under different regimes. So so perhaps understanding some of that applicability better, and also I think watching the evolution of the technology and where those most promising use cases are happening, so we can study a little bit what are the gains that we're trying to achieve, and then also how do we make sure those happen in a way that consumers are feeling comfortable and safe, businesses are able to deploy and commission those services in a way that fits with their business strategy and long-term as well as near-term needs. So with that, I am going to thank you all as panelists. I hope you'll continue to participate and enjoy the exciting set of presenters that we have. And I will hand the microphone back to Pauline Arbel, who's going to facilitate the next session.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for this very rich panel discussion. So in this next session, we're going to shift the lens a little bit from strategy to practice, and we'll be looking at real-world applications of immersive technologies. So first, we'll take a local lens, and we'll look at how cities are using urban digital twins to manage climate risks. Then we'll look at digital health, exploring virtual human modeling, before moving to immersive procedural training, focusing on VR training for nurses and surgeons. So let us begin at the city level. I'm very pleased to welcome our first presenters, Claudia Barancelli and Jisoo Yoon. While I introduce them, I will let them share their screen. So Claudia leads the Geospatial Lab here at the OECD. She holds a PhD in urban, regional, and environmental planning. Jisoo is a policy analyst also here at the OECD. She's an expert in the decarbonization of buildings, particularly through digital tools. Together, they co-lead the OECD work on urban digital twins, and they will show us today how immersive technologies can support climate resilience at the local level. As before, please feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A function, and we'll take them at the end of the 3 presentations. Claudia, Jisoo, over to you.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, OECD colleagues, also from my side for this kind invitation. We're really happy to share with you our ongoing work on urban digital twins. And I can already say that many of the issues you mentioned actually resonates a lot with the work that we are doing. Just to give a little bit the context, urban digital twins as a topic, they're part of the OECD work on cities, data and resilience. As Pauline was mentioning, this is a very much transversal type of work. We are working specifically across different parts of the house. We're putting together the group specialized on cities and urban policies with the one working on economic analysis, data and statistics. In particular, now we are working on a project in collaboration with the Japanese Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism, whose objective is really to investigate digital twin applications across OECD cities in order to assess barriers and opportunities for their upscaling. So as I said, these are actually buzzwords that we have been hearing a lot in the previous panel. And I'm also happy that many of the initiatives mentioned also from the European Commission are actually somehow connected to our project. The European Commission mentioned also the Cityverse consortium, and actually that's one of the partners that we're working with in this project. So let me start with a little bit of a broad introduction also in terms of concepts. What do we mean with digital twin? If I have to give a general definition, that's virtual representation of the physical entities and processes. So such digital twins use real-time and historical data to represent both the past and the present, but also models that can help simulate possible future scenarios. This definition, of course, applies also to complex realities and complex systems such as a city or an urban environment. And in order to understand how an urban digital twin then works and operates, I think it's quite useful to mention what an operating cycle is. In a nutshell, it's a dynamic cycle or an infinite loop, however you want to look at it, involving data, analysis, and action. So basically, it's everything that is required to maintain a functional urban digital twin. And this point is really, really important because an urban digital twin is or should be not a one-time creation, but really a permanent process where data is continuously gathered, translated into useful information, then constantly updated, analyzed, and finally used to influence the real world. In terms of outcomes for cities, this is, of course, super important because urban digital twin, broadly speaking, can be used for both, supports data-driven decision-making, and also devise very specific actions in order to tackle specific problems that take place or that should be solved within a city. So in terms of applications, again, a huge variety of possibilities. Urban digital twins can be used for urban planning and design, for instance, to decide how to develop specific neighborhoods of the city and looking at different options before actually realizing them. They can be used for city management and optimization of their operation. Think about maintenance of the urban green or roads and streets. Can be used to optimize transport system or energy system. So really a huge variety of application. And climate risk and disaster is a very important one. As we know, in the last decades, extreme weather events have been really increasing in both intensity and frequency. So think about floods, heat waves, storms, droughts, or wildfires. And the impacts of these extreme events concentrate or pose specific challenges to the urban environment and to cities. This translates into economic losses, but not only, obviously, also in terms of life loss. And what's important to say is, you well know, these impacts are actually quite widespread, and both emerging and developing economies and developed economies are actually affected by this. So think, for instance, in terms of infrastructure failure or insurance gap. Now, to understand how urban digital twins can help cities address climate risk and manage climate risk, we need to understand two important frameworks. So we need to understand first the timescale on which climate risk operates, and also the elements or components of the risk itself. So let's start from the timescale. A disruptive event happens. There is a before, a during, and an after. So if we think in these terms, an urban digital twin, for instance, looking at the past, can really help to calibrate models to identify recurring vulnerabilities. So assets, either physical or human or related to natural ecosystem, that are more likely to be impacted by these extreme events. In the present, urban digital twins can help issuing early warnings and producing dynamically exposure updates. In the near future, they can help with predictive simulations, for instance, planning for evacuation routes just before an event is likely to hit. So think about a landslide or floods. And in the long term, of course, it can really help playing with alternative scenarios that can support the improvements for increasing the resilience of infrastructure, or creating a specific policy responses also in terms of nature-based solutions. So as a whole, an urban digital twin really has this advantage of bridging all timescales with a persistent and consistent digital replica, and this is quite a unique feature of this type of technology. Then we need to understand also how climate risk is composed, so the different components from hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and response. And here I'll give the floor to my colleague Jisoo to explain this part also through really practical examples.
Thank you so much, Claudia, and also thank you so much, Pauline, for the very generous and kind introduction. So now let me show you how digital twins address climate risk using the IPCC framework. So the IPCC identifies 4 risk elements: hazards, exposure, vulnerability, and response. And digital twins address all 4. First, hazard, right? So digital twins simulate and monitor natural hazards such as floods, heat waves, and storms using real-time and historical data. Think of it as cities' early warning system, constantly tracking climate events as they develop. And second, exposure. Digital twins map who and what is at risk: people, infrastructure, and system with dynamic overlays. And third, vulnerability. So digital twins identify socially and physically vulnerable areas using demographic, infrastructure, and health data. And fourth, response. Digital twins optimize early warning, evacuation, emergency operations, the real-time dashboards, and predictive what-if scenarios. Next slide, please. So those are the 4 IPCC risk components. And now let me show you how 2 different cities are applying the same exact principles to different climate challenges. Our first case is Rotterdam in the Netherlands. So for hazards, Rotterdam faces sea level rise, which is expected to face 1.2 meters by 2100s, and increased flooding from Nieuws Maas River. So Rotterdam's digital twin is still developing, but the vision it shows has a great potential. They're working with a software called 3DI, which is a water management system, and that simulates flood dynamics at a very high spatial resolution, so 0.5 by 0.5 meters. And this means that they can model exactly where water will flow at the level of individual streets and buildings. For vulnerabilities, Rotterdam is hard paved and densely built. This limits water absorption, so the digital twin can map surfaces lacking the sponge effect. And for exposure, here's the striking part: 85% of the city lies below the sea level. The digital twin can identify the unbanked areas that aren't protected by dikes. And for response, the digital twin can run flooding simulations all the way to 2100. This helps Rotterdam answer the question, such as, how high do we need to build to stay safe? Based on these simulations, they can establish minimum building heights to ensure flood safety for the rest of the century. And now let's go to Busan, South Korea. So for hazards, Busan faces precipitation-induced landslides during the monsoon season. So from June to September, it accounts for about 90% of the annual rainfall. And the digital twin uses an integrated sensor network, such as rain sensors and soil moisture sensors. And all this data feeds into the predictions of 24 and 48 hours in advance. For vulnerabilities, Busan has mountainous terrain with old buildings on slopes, unstable soil, and aging structures with limited foundation reinforcement. So the digital twin creates a 3D slope gradient mapping with color-coded risk zones such as red, yellow, green, identifying which buildings are most vulnerable. And for exposure, so Busan Jingu, which is the pilot zone of the urban digital twin, contains a major commercial hub such as Seomyeon, along with approximately 360,000 residents living in hillsides neighborhoods. So many homes are literally built on slopes. So the digital twin maps all exposed structure using a complete 3D BIM model. And for response, they have launched one 365 Twin Busan platform. So this name actually signifies 365-day continuous monitoring within a year. So it provides a year-round citizen safety services for landslide disaster management and other urban policy areas. So let's now look at the snapshots of the 365 platform. On the left side, it's the public service. This is citizen facing. So regular people can check vibration sensing points near their homes. They can see 48-hour predictive risk analysis for their neighborhoods, and they can find landslide damage and shelter information, knowing exactly where to evacuate when alerts come. And on the right side is the administrative service for the governments. So officials have real-time integrated landslide monitoring with comprehensive dashboards. They can run a landslide simulation analysis, testing different rainfall scenarios to see debris flow patterns, spread speeds, and impacts after 50 minutes, 30 minutes, and 60 minutes intervals. So this dual service approach ensures citizens get actionable safety information while governments get decision-making tools. So you've just seen the IPCC framework in action, digital twins managing climate risk in Rotterdam and Busan. But as Claudia mentioned, climate is just one application. Urban digital twins support traffic management, energy optimization, public health, and much more. So for those who are interested in exploring the wider potential of this technology, we're actually hosting the Urban Digital Twin Workstream kickoff webinar on February 25th from 9:30 to 11:30. And you will hear cities from in the EU, Germany, Japan, and Australia, how they're implementing digital twin policies across multiple sectors. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Claudia and Jisoo, for this insightful presentation. We're now going to move from urban digital twins to human digital twins, exploring how replications of human organs can transform medical care. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Stephen Levine. He's a Senior Director of Virtual Human Modeling at Dassault Systèmes. He's a fellow of the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering. He holds a PhD in materials science, and he has more than 30 years of experience in advanced simulation tools. He now leads virtual human modeling initiatives, and he also founded the Living Heart Project, which he will present to us in a few seconds. Dr. Levine, the floor is now yours.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to share my story. I think that introduction to digital twins really sets the stage for what I'm going to talk about. And this is a far more personal use of digital twins. In fact, I actually prefer the term virtual twin. And as you'll see, in many ways, the virtual twin, these terms get thrown around back and forth, and so they really are just terms. But the idea of virtualizing information is much more expansive and creative. And so I'll be using the term virtual twin, but it's more or less the same concept. And so my talk, I'll go through maybe the last 10 years of learning that I have gone through in this domain in about 10 minutes. So I'll go relatively quickly, but we'll have time to chat at the end. So I'll talk a little bit more. We heard about what virtual twins are. I'll go through an explanation of how they apply in healthcare, what they enable, and how that can affect some thoughts on or cue up the conversation on what that means for policy and government. So what are virtual twins? Well, we heard that for the city. The interesting thing about when we're talking about healthcare or digital virtual human twins, we're here to talk about immersive technologies, and often we're talking about immersing the person in the data. We kind of flip the script on this, and you're actually taking all the data about a human and bringing it together inside the human, or at least representing the full, complete human. And so it's immersive in the sense that it brings all the information, about the human health, the human body, etc. But it's contained in the twin. So the foundation of the twin, we've heard about this before. A lot of the technology that we use was driven by industries like the automotive or aerospace industry. I show an example here from, this is actually from BMW, where one of the first cars that they completely virtualized, they're showing the crash test. And these are not just static images. It's a fully functioning car. So you can see this car, you can crash it, you can put crash test dummies inside, you can see exactly what's happening. Before the car is ever built, you can pull away the skin and see what's happening. And that's why we have such safe automobiles, creativity, self-driving cars, etc. This has been done. In fact, these are over 15 years old, these images. BMW back in 2013 said they no longer have to build prototypes. They physically test the virtual twin. They build the real car, they test that, but they have no surprises. They know it's going to work. Same thing for a commercial aircraft. Imagine an Airbus 350. They don't need to build actual prototypes. They can build it all using the virtual twin. In fact, the same concept was given the Nobel Prize in 2013, applying to the human body. And here we see a virtual twin of the COVID spike, as we know, is instrumental in helping to calm that pandemic. But when I look back, this is at 2013, I looked at healthcare. While the automotive industry had these amazing virtual twins, complete representations of the final product, in the medical area, the representations were very simplistic. They looked nothing or behaved nothing like the actual human. And I wondered what the difference was. Was it technological or was it cultural? Do we not have the guidance? Was there no automotive company that brings all the technologies together that's the equivalent in the medical field? The governments weren't doing it. The researchers were doing their piece. Nobody was bringing it together. So I thought, okay, well, what if we brought it together? What if I brought it together? And I launched a project I called the Living Heart Project to bring together all of the researchers, the clinicians, the industry, the government regulators, to see if we could work on the same reference and do the same thing with the human heart. To do that, you need to bring a lot of technologies together. I won't go through this in any detail. You have to model it all the way from the molecules that make up the tissue all the way through the whole heart and then eventually patients. I began with the organ, the whole organ, because that's where you're going to engage the doctors. That's where you can engage people. And so to build a virtual twin of the heart, this is a very quick overview. You have to bring together the physical geometry, which you could get by reconstructing MRI or CT scans. You bring the tissue mechanics, the electrical system, all the detail. And when I brought together all of those experts, wherever they were in the world, within 1 year, it turned out we actually had enough knowledge to build a completely functioning. So 1 year after those very basic models, we actually had a complete, fully functioning virtual twin of the human heart. And here's an example of that heart that we built over 10 years ago. And this is not just an animation, this is a really full engineering model working the same way nature has engineered the heart. And so just like the car, you can peel the skin away and look at the blood flowing inside. You can pull it apart, look at the valves, see what the disease is and how to fix it. And of course, you can personalize it. So here's an example of predicting the treatment of a replacement valve inside the heart without ever actually cutting the patient open. And so very quickly, by working together, it turned out we could actually close the gap for healthcare. And so that project has now been ongoing for over 10 years. We have over 160 different members continuing to work together to create a consensus opinion about what is the best way to use the technology. What's exciting is that while healthcare tends to be local, the human health is not. And so we have over 28 different countries all represented in the project. So there's one representation that covers all of those. And the applications, I'll just show you some quick examples of what the community has been able to do. So medical device industry now, just like the car, instead of testing on animals or testing on benchtops, they're actually testing on virtual humans. The innovations that are coming out are all using that. We've built the workflow to be able to look at drug effects all the way down to the molecules. So take a drug and see how it's going to affect your heart. Is it going to cure it? Is it going to hurt it? Virtually every type of condition now, because it behaves just like a real human. You can introduce disease and you can cure it, and you don't actually have to do that on the person. Well, as you know, the arbiter of what is testing of humans are the regulators. And so after being part of the project for first 5 years, the FDA stepped up and said, okay, we think this is the future of clinical trials. We shouldn't be testing on humans. We need to move past animals. And so they funded a project where we built an entire clinical trial based on the virtual heart. They appreciated the fact that we had a global consensus, and we brought all those experts in to oversee the project. And after 5 years, we successfully published the guidance documents that now will allow the US FDA to accept this virtual twin as a replacement, a surrogate for a real patient. Just like the automotive companies and aerospace regulators will take that data. You still have to test the final product, but with fewer surprises and far fewer testing on humans. Moreover, of course, we're able to use these beginning to work by taking those and allowing them to be used in clinical applications. So here's examples. We're working with Boston Children's Hospital, where we've done, this is a little dated, over 2,000 patients where they test the surgery on the virtual twin first. They try out 3 or 4 different surgeries to see which one will be best. Once they find it, that's what they do. And the outcomes are dramatically better. They've reduced the revisions from 2 or 3 surgeries down to 1. They truly get it right the first time. So we know it works. It's now expanding. So I share here several years ago as part of France 2030, the MediTwin consortium was funded by France to bring together clinical applications across cardiovascular, cancer, neurological diseases. The European Union has created an ecosystem that they funded as part of their 2030 goals to actually build the European virtual twin. And of course, at the center of that is enabling technologies, AI. These virtual twins speak the language. They bring the physical nature of the human into the AI. So instead of being language-based, these are human-based by digitizing the human, but this is now realistic human behavior. And that is actually at the foundation of what we did in the FDA enrichment in silico clinical trial project. We took real patients, built their virtual twins, but those became the training set for the actual AI system that built the clinical trial. And so we've come up with this idea that by curating real patient data in advance, you can create a sort of ground truth for the AI system. And of course, now people are collecting lots of their own health data through wearables, sensors, and things like that. And just like as we heard in the smart city or an aircraft where they predict the maintenance, we should be able to have you predict when you need maintenance on your body before it happens. So being preventative by using your virtual twin. And although I said the virtual twin is not necessarily about immersing people, this is highly visual technology. People are using it to understand what's happening inside their body on the outside. This is an example of one of the first immersive displays we created where you could actually go inside the heart, listen to the beat, and actually have a really profound experience. And so what we've done is effectively bridge the gap in bringing together all of the scientific and medical information, whereas in the past, when you get to a certain scale in research, you had to use an animal model to represent an organ, the heart, the brain, or something. And there was a gap between that and the actual human experience. And that has led to about 90% failures of everything we try to bring to market. And that increases costs, et cetera. But now we have a virtual human, and that allows us with generative AI to be able to create something we call physical AI. And we have now immersive capability where all that data can all be brought to bear. And we've gone beyond just the heart. We're using the same methodology to do the brain, the liver, the kidney, step by step, hopefully building a virtual human, which is where we need guidance, because still each of these communities are working individually. So I think eventually, if we work collectively, we can build this capability where all the scientific data, all the medical data has the same reference. Nature has given us that reference. We just need to enforce it. And so, so this brings us to where we're at today. When I started the project, we built the very first twin. Now, with the evolution, the templates in place, governments kicking in, we have a choice. Are we going to build a myriad of different virtual twins of organs and different people, or are we going to create some guidelines, some structures, some governance, so we can actually have a scalable system the way, for example, the aerospace industry has done? And so end with this quote, because we don't necessarily need different representation of humans in different countries. We're all basically the same. We have some differences, but the vast majority of us is the same. And so if we can bridge the international community with some governance, I think we can solve this problem of healthcare that we're all struggling with. So I won't go through the takeaway messages in the interest of time, but hopefully that gives you a sense of what we can actually do in healthcare. So thank you for inviting me, and hopefully you found that interesting.
Thank you so much, Dr. Levine, for this fascinating presentation on human virtual twins. It was very interesting. For our final segment, we'll now turn to a critical question, which is how can immersive technology support skills training, particularly in high-stakes professions like healthcare? And it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Justin Barad. Justin is a practicing pediatric orthopedic surgeon, and he's the founder of OSOVR, a leading virtual reality surgical training platform. Justin, I'll let you upload your presentation while I introduce you. Interestingly, Justin began his career intending to become a video game developer before moving into medicine. He's now trained at UCLA. He completed a fellowship at Harvard and Boston Children's Hospital, and he's now brought these two worlds together to rethink how surgical training can be improved. Justin, over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well. It's been a super stimulating webinar. I'm talking today about one of the biggest problems we have in healthcare today, which is how we train and assess our healthcare professionals with procedures and skills, which I've seen firsthand in my own training, and I see day to day in kind of just real world patient care. So a lot of us in healthcare, if you have any familiarity, this is a very common expression. If you don't, maybe it'll be a little bit alarming, but this is how we describe the acquisition of technical skills, whether you're talking about procedural skills like putting in IV or doing complex surgery like a knee replacement. So the idea of see one, do one, teach one. So this is the apprenticeship model, and sometimes taken quite literally, which is somewhat alarming. So the problem that I found over the past few, I guess decade now, is really a combination of factors. This explosion of scientific advancement, the explosion of the number of procedures any healthcare professional is expected to learn, increasing complexity of the procedures themselves, and then a real lack of objective assessment. We don't really have a way to assess, are we ready to do procedures, or are other people ready? I always tell, kind of tongue in cheek, but this is true, that the only time I've really been objectively assessed, I was asked to play the board game Operation and remove some pieces without buzzing, which I did. But that was kind of state of the art when I was in my training. I've been working on this for about the past decade at OSO. It's used around the world, training surgeons in over 50 countries, training thousands of healthcare professionals a month. But what became interesting is this is not just a problem that doctors and surgeons are facing, but also nurses and other healthcare professionals as well. So another area we've been looking into lately is really around the nursing space, which is, if you think about it, orders of magnitude larger. So in the US, there may be a couple 100,000 surgeons. There are over 5 million nurses. So the kind of impact that you can have is much larger. And nurses are facing a number of challenges when it comes to the performance of procedures and skills. And there's a growing gap of what nurses are learning in school versus what they need for their day-to-day practice. So what happens is nurses are hired by a hospital, but they are not yet proficient or ready to perform the skills needed. So there's an ever-growing kind of onboarding period where nurses are sort of going through something called transition to practice, where they're hired and then they're getting to the point where they're able to take care of patients and perform procedures proficiently on their own. And this transition to practice period can be up to a year long. And what ends up happening is if nurses are thrown in too soon, they feel uncomfortable, stressed, they burn out very quickly, and they end up dropping out. So we saw this pattern really accelerate during COVID and has not improved significantly. So we need some way that we can accelerate the onboarding for these nurses and also make sure that they are ready to do their job and feel confident and comfortable so that they stay in the job and we're not running into this shortage that we're currently experiencing here in the US and similarly abroad. So enter immersive training, where I think we've been talking about VR and immersive technology for the past couple of hours. You put on a headset, you can easily perform any procedure that's theoretically possible. It's very intuitive, easy to use. And then it's also paired with objective assessment. So you're getting feedback not only within the experience, but you can review sort of how you performed and how those of you are training performed and see where there are gaps and where remediation needs to take place before you are interacting with people. So very similar to Dr. Levine's presentation, we're trying to kind of move that education or risk portion away from, in his case, animals or humans. And in our case, we want to make sure that we're ready to go before we're practicing on people. So here's just some quick examples. This is our IV placement training procedure. So what's unique about this platform is the ability to perform pretty, I would say, like high fidelity, fine motor skills. So here you're being assessed on your angle of entry, the rotation of the bevel of the needle as you pierce the skin. Do you go through the back of the vein, in addition to performing other critical steps of the procedure? It also incorporates real-time physics, which I get very excited about. So this is just an example where we're draping the patient for a urinary catheter procedure. Once you're done with the procedure, you're getting feedback on your overall score, your time, your performance with a critical action checklist, and then also how you do related to several what we call domains of excellence, such as infection prevention and resource utilization, and patient experience, which is also quite important. The platform is turnkey, it's self-serve, but you can also bring in a remote coach or train with your team. So what I get most excited about is, does this technology actually work? So this is something that I've spent probably way too much time doing with independent academic medical centers, evaluating the technology. So on the right side, you're seeing an individual that was trained and assessed with virtual reality. So we can assess, hey, when is this person ready to actually perform the procedure in a test environment, which you're seeing here. Whereas on the left side, this is a person that feels ready to perform the procedures, given as much time as they needed to prepare, and then coming in when they feel ready. And you can see there's a little piece of paper in the lower right corner of the table here. That's a cheat sheet you can check if you don't remember what to do next. The person who felt ready checks this piece of paper 26 times. The individual who is measured to be ready checked it 0 times. So if you take anything away from this talk, other than that I'm caffeinated and I got up at 3:30 in the morning here, it's that how we feel and what reality is can be shockingly different. And that's why I feel that objective assessment is so critical to be used across all of healthcare, when it comes to procedures and surgery. So in this study published in the Journal of Surgical Education, the VR assessed group performed almost 10 points better than the traditionally trained group. And then both groups came back 2 weeks later, and there's an even bigger difference, as you can see, in favor of VR. In this study performed at the University of Illinois Chicago, published in the journal Core, this looked at the ability to perform a procedure without needing supervision. With traditional training, 25% of the group could complete a procedure. With VR, that went up to 78%. This is a study at the community hospital in California looking at the ability to perform a unicondylar knee replacement. With VR training, the procedure was about 10 minutes faster, had 60% fewer errors, and interestingly, required less training time. So there's a concept called the transfer efficiency ratio, where VR is a more efficient way of training rather than reading a book or watching a video. Speaking of, this is a study performed at UCLA comparing VR to video-based training and found that the VR group was faster and more accurate in a test environment. Here's a study from Johns Hopkins comparing hands-on physical training to VR only and found that both groups were equivalent in the test environment. I personally do not recommend fully replacing hands-on training with VR. It's complementary. It accelerates training. So you don't need as much hands-on training time with, say, like a cadaver lab or physical training model. But in this study, it was comparable. And then finally, here's a motion analysis study. On the left side, you're seeing hands-on physical training. On the right side, you're seeing VR only. So what we can do is we can superimpose these two data sets. And as you can see for yourself, it's very hard to tell the difference between what is real life and what's virtual. And we look statistically at 64 different motion variables, and 63 were statistically identical between the two groups. So I think the technology is out there, it's in use. We're seeing the real world impact already. And I think it's incredible that, this technology, which is super scalable, can simulate any procedure, is going to have such a massive impact on us as patients and healthcare professionals, just given the sheer scale of, like I said before, 200,000 surgeons, 5 million nurses, let alone around the world, and each of those taking care of innumerable patients every day. So what, ultimately started as video game technology is going to have a major impact on the safety of these procedures and our health and outcomes. So thank you guys so much for your time, and look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Justin, and to all our speakers for these really rich and complementary perspectives. We now have a few minutes left for one question that I'm going to ask each of you, and I will ask you to answer individually. So the question is, what are the main technical, regulatory, and institutional barriers for the large-scale adoption of the immersive technologies that you have presented today? I don't know who wants to begin. Maybe Justin, do you want to start?
Yeah, I would say that, VR is a pretty self-contained, almost turnkey technology. So outside of a Wi-Fi connection, I would say, and then, VR is getting more frictionless all the time, but there is a little bit of a learning curve, whether you're a trainee or an educator. As a user, that learning curve is like 1 to 2 minutes, just to give a sense of scale. As an educator, I think, to become a VR expert, maybe 30 minutes, but anyone can facilitate a VR session. So I'd say those are the major kind of technical adoptions. And then you want to make sure that you are aligning with kind of national gold standards of how are these procedures performed, and then building the content itself, which is what we specialize in, but ultimately is probably, I think, when it comes to VR training, one of the biggest challenges is how do you develop all of the procedures that need to be performed and trained on? And I think across the space, that is kind of ultimately what is the major bottleneck to adoption is, hey, we have 50 procedures we need to train our nurses. Someone needs to build those. And that's what we do, and that's what we've done. But ultimately, that is what takes the most time. And if you're the developer, the cost as well.
Thank you so much. Steve, your turn. Can you tell us what are the main barriers on your side for the large-scale adoption?
Sure. What comes to mind, I would say there's two in different places in the system. So the predominant one is the lack of standards in this field. As I kind of described, medicine, and Justin pointed out, it's been an observatory field see one, do one, test one. So people haven't systematically defined what it means to be human. And so when you're creating references, there isn't an agreed upon, well, what is normal? What is healthy? What is a disease? And so while we're developing all this great technology, there's no consistency, and therefore implementing it in practice becomes very challenging because it's hard to say, does it achieve the standard? Because there is no standard. The second piece, and Justin touched on this a little bit, is that while medicine has become, or healthcare has become digital, the infrastructure is really just analog. We're still stuck in 1D words, 2D pictures. The human is 3D, virtual reality, the virtual twin. We have to get our clinical environments up to speed with modern technology, the ability to actually visualize and interact with these robust objects. That will come, but it will take a little time.
Thank you so much. Claudia, Jisoo, do you have similar barriers to mention?
Yes, we do. Maybe I can start mentioning a couple and then I'll leave the floor to Jisoo to complement. Just because I heard about standards and lack of standards. In the case of urban digital twins, actually, it seems that at times we have too many standards and we need to understand how to implement them. Also taking into account the different context in terms, for instance, of cities, whether we are dealing with a large metropole or a small city. So there is a huge work to go from having standards and good practices into actually translate them into reality. And then I'm going to mention also, because I stay on the technical side, also skills. That's another big barrier in terms of the local, the uptake from the local administration when it comes to this type of digital tools. Jisoo?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for this great question. And for my side, I think there are two main institutional challenges. The first thing is the funding sustainability. So building a digital infrastructure at a civil level, it's a very costly process. And I gave an example of Busan Urban Digital Twin, and actually it was a pilot project which was funded by the Ministry of Science and ICT in Korea for a couple of years. So in order to continue this momentum, it is important that the city secures a sustainable funding, and that's a big challenge. And the second one is interministerial coordination. So I think that urban digital twin kind of is at the intersection of the smart city development and also digital technology development. So for example, again, going back to Busan case, the whole pilot project was funded by the Ministry of Science and ICT, whereas most of the landing policies are under the responsibility of the Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Transport in Korea. So this type of a silo sometimes makes a little bit of hiccups and also cause unnecessary time and cost. So I think that these are the two institutional challenges that I see here.
Well, thank you so much for sharing these barriers. I wish we could stay longer to exchange because this was so interesting, but unfortunately we have to wrap up this event, and I'm going to hand over to you, Elizabeth, for the closing remarks. Thank you so much to all our presenters and our participants today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, presenters, panelists, for your insights. I really appreciate all of our participants as well for engaging in this Global Forum on Technology webinar. We've had this opportunity to hear from the practical use case example. So thank you to our presenters for making it real for us, even if it is virtual when you're playing with it. and also our panelists on the for the good discussion. I'm not going to recap things because we're running right out of time. I just want to note on the screen here, you see how to stay engaged with us, how to continue participating in this discussion. We really heard how important it is to bring together the community, the different perspectives, and to keep working on these challenges together. We're taking away a good list of things that perhaps need deeper dives and further exploration and maybe more facilitation of discussions. Finally, I just want to recognize the fabulous team who are behind this event. Pauline Arbel for all the heavy lifting and curating, and those of you who've been interacting with her know what a pleasure it is to participate with that support. Andres Baranici as well, and Stephanie Root, thank you for facilitating everything. And with that, I will close today's session. Thank you all very much.